It was just another mundane Monday morning at Pacific Trust Bank's bustling downtown branch. The morning sun streamed through the tall glass windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor as customers shuffled in and out, going about their daily business. Behind her desk, the newly promoted bank manager, Miss Thompson, straightened her navy blazer and smiled with pride. After 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder, she had finally achieved her dream position just 2 months ago. She had always been known for running a tight ship, and today was no exception. Her employees moved with precision, handling transactions efficiently while maintaining the professional atmosphere she demanded. The security guard at the entrance nodded respectfully as she passed by during her routine morning walk through the branch. Everything looks perfect, she thought to herself, watching as her team handled the morning rush with practiced ease. The gentle hum of conversation and clicking of keyboards filled the air, creating that perfect banking ambience she strived for. But then something disrupted her perfectly orchestrated morning. Through the gleaming glass doors walked a man who seemed completely out of place in the upscale financial institution. His worn jeans had seen better days, and his wrinkled t-shirt looked like it had been pulled straight from the laundry basket. But what really caught her attention, and the attention of every customer in the lobby, was the bright red MAGA hat perched boldly on his head. The man's presence immediately created a ripple effect throughout the branch. Several customers began whispering among themselves, while others shifted uncomfortably in the waiting area. A young teller at the counter looked uncertainly toward Ms. Thompson, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Despite his shabby appearance, the man carried himself with an odd confidence. He walked straight past the velvet ropes marking the queue line and headed toward the premium banking section, pulling out his phone as he walked. His casual disregard for bank protocol made Ms. Thompson's jaw tighten. In her mind, this was exactly the kind of disruption she had worked so hard to prevent in her branch. She watched as he paused to examine the investment posters on the wall, seemingly oblivious to the stares he was attracting. A couple of customers had already pulled out their phones, likely documenting what they assumed would become some sort of scene. The tension in the lobby was palpable. Taking a deep breath and straightening her designer glasses, Miss Thompson knew it was time to intervene. This was her branch, after all, and she had specific standards to maintain. As she began walking toward the mysterious man, she mentally prepared her most professional yet firm tone, the one she had perfected over years of handling difficult situations. Little did she know, this interaction would soon become the talk of the entire financial world, and her ordinary Monday was about to become anything but mundane. As she approached him, she had no idea she was about to come face to face with one of the most powerful men in the world, and make a decision that would change her life forever. The clicking of her heels against the marble floor echoed through the suddenly quiet lobby as she approached, her mind already made up about how this situation needed to be handled. After all, rules were rules, and she hadn't gotten to where she was by making exceptions, even for unusually confident men in red baseball caps. Ms. Thompson's heels clicked against the floor as she approached the man in the MAGA hat, who was now leaning casually against one of the marble pillars, still focused on his phone. Her years of customer service experience had taught her how to handle difficult situations with grace, but something about this man's casual disregard for bank protocol particularly irritated her. "Excuse me, sir," she said, using her most professional tone. "I need to speak with you about our bank's policy." The man looked up from his phone, his expression curious rather than confrontational. His eyes had an unusual intensity about them, and despite his scruffy appearance, there was something oddly familiar about his face that she couldn't quite place. "I understand you might have business here today," she continued, noticing more customers pulling out their phones to record the interaction. "However, we maintain a strict professional environment, and political statements of any kind aren't permitted within our branch." She gestured meaningfully toward his red hat. The man's response wasn't what she expected. Instead of getting angry or defensive, he simply smiled. I appreciate your concern, he said calmly, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. But I actually have an important meeting here today. I'm sure if you check with your superiors. Miss Thompson didn't let him finish. If there was one thing she prided herself on, it was knowing every important meeting scheduled in her branch. Sir, I manage this branch, and I can assure you there are no meetings scheduled that would excuse violation of our dress code policy. By now, the lobby had gone completely quiet. Even the usual sounds of typing and paper shuffling had ceased as everyone watched the scene unfold. A young mother pulled her curious child closer, while an elderly gentleman in an expensive suit actually nodded in approval at Ms. Thompson's handling of the situation. I understand, the man said, still surprisingly calm. But perhaps we could call your regional director. I believe Mr. Peters would be able to clarify things. The casual mention of her superior's name caught her off guard, but she quickly recovered. Anyone could have found that information online, she reasoned. Sir, if you're not here for legitimate banking business, I'll have to ask you to leave. Her voice remained steady, but she gestured subtly to the security guard, who began moving in their direction. We can't have political demonstrations disrupting our customers. The man in the hat sighed and pulled out his phone again. Okay, let me handle this myself. He pressed a few buttons and held the phone to his ear. Hey, John. Yes, I'm at the downtown branch right now. Seems we have a bit of a situation. Ms. Thompson felt a flicker of uncertainty as she watched him speak into the phone with such confidence. Her own phone began buzzing in her pocket, but she ignored it, focused on maintaining control of the situation. The security guard now stood just a few feet away, waiting for her signal. Look, she said firmly, I don't know who you're calling, but... She was interrupted by the sound of her office phone ringing, followed immediately by the branch's general line. Then her cell phone started buzzing again. Something wasn't right. The man lowered his phone and looked at her with what almost seemed like sympathy. I think you might want to answer one of those calls, he suggested quietly. It would save us all some time. The atmosphere in the bank had shifted from tense to electric. Customers who had been recording now whispered among themselves, as if sensing they were witnessing something significant. Miss Thompson stood her ground, but a tiny voice in the back of her mind was beginning to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Little did she know, the next few minutes would completely transform her understanding of the phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover," and possibly change the course of her career forever. The bank lobby had become a stage, and every eye was fixed on the unfolding drama. Miss Thompson's phone wouldn't stop buzzing in her pocket, and the constant ringing of office phones created an almost musical backdrop to the tense situation. Still, she stood her ground, determined not to let this unusually confident man in a MAGA hat undermine her authority. I'll handle the calls later, she said firmly, though a bead of sweat was forming on her forehead. Right now, I need you to either remove the hat or leave the premises. The security guard took another step closer, his presence adding weight to her words. The man's response was unexpected. He actually chuckled, not in a mocking way, but as if genuinely amused by the situation. You know, he said, I respect your dedication to policy, but sometimes things aren't exactly what they seem. As he spoke, a sleek black car pulled up outside the bank's glass doors, and several people in expensive suits rushed out. Miss Thompson's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the bank's regional director, Mr. Peters, among them. He burst through the doors, slightly out of breath, his usually perfectly calmed hair askew. The look of panic on his face made her stomach drop. Miss Thompson, he called out, hurrying across the lobby. Please tell me you haven't. He stopped mid-sentence, seeing the situation was exactly what he'd feared. The color drained from his face as he turned to the man in the hat. Mr. Musk, I cannot apologize enough for this misunderstanding. The words hit her like a bucket of ice water. Mr. Musk? As in Elon Musk? She felt her knees go weak as the reality of the situation crashed over her. The mysterious phone calls, the confident attitude, the casual mention of the regional director's name. It all made horrible sense now. Customers who had been recording the scene gasped audibly. Someone whispered, "I knew he looked familiar." Another person was already typing frantically on their phone, no doubt sharing the story on social media. More executives poured into the bank, creating a flurry of activity. The bank's CEO himself arrived moments later, looking like he'd run several blocks in his expensive Italian suit. Miss Thompson stood frozen, her mind racing through all the things she'd said in the last few minutes. Had she really just tried to kick out the owner of her bank? "I believe your phone's been ringing," Musk said kindly, gesturing to her pocket. "Might want to check those messages now." His voice held no malice, which somehow made the situation even more mortifying. The security guard, who had been ready to escort Musk out moments ago, now looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. A few customers were trying to hide their smiles, while others looked on with sympathy. The young mother from earlier was whispering to her child, "See, honey, this is why we never judge people by how they look." Finally finding her voice, Miss Thompson opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The regional director was already launching into an effusive apology, while the CEO hovered nearby, looking like he might faint. The bank's carefully maintained professional atmosphere had dissolved into chaos. Through it all, Musk remained surprisingly calm, still leaning against the pillar, as if this was all perfectly normal. He glanced at his phone, then looked up at the growing crowd of executives. "Well," he said with a slight smile, "since I'm already here, should we start that meeting early?" The story was already spreading beyond the bank's walls. Through the windows, people could be seen pointing and taking pictures. In less than an hour, this quiet Monday morning would become a viral sensation, and Miss Thompson's world would never be quite the same again. The bank's premium meeting room had never felt so crowded. Every executive who could make it to the branch was now packed inside, creating a sea of expensive suits surrounding the man in jeans and a MAGA hat. Miss Thompson sat at the far end of the table, feeling like she was watching everything happen from underwater. 3 months ago, my investment firm acquired a controlling stake in Pacific Trust Bank, Musk explained to the room, his voice casual as if he were discussing the weather. We kept it quiet to avoid market speculation. He paused, glancing at Miss Thompson with what looked almost like amusement. Though I suppose today's events might change that. Outside the glass-walled meeting room, customers pressed their faces against the windows, phones recording every moment. The story was spreading like wildfire across social media. #Bankgate was already trending, with people sharing blurry photos and videos of the earlier confrontation. Miss Thompson's own phone had exploded with notifications. Friends and family were sending messages asking if the viral videos they'd seen were really her. Her LinkedIn profile was getting flooded with views and messages. Some praised her for standing up for policy, while others criticized her for what they called obvious discrimination. The regional director was still apologizing profusely, wiping sweat from his forehead with an already damp handkerchief. "Mr. Musk, I assure you, this isn't how we typically treat our clients, let alone our owner. Miss Thompson is normally quite." "Actually," Musk interrupted, raising his hand, "I'd like to hear from Miss Thompson herself." All eyes in the room turned to her, and she felt her throat go dry. The moment she'd been dreading had arrived. Taking a deep breath, she straightened in her chair. "Mr. Musk, she began, her voice shaking slightly. She paused, gathered her courage, and started again. "I made a terrible mistake today. I was so focused on maintaining what I thought was proper bank protocol that I forgot the most important part of my job: treating everyone with respect, regardless of how they look or what they're wearing." The room fell silent. Even the whispers outside the glass walls seemed to quiet down. Musk leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "You know what's interesting?" he said. "In the 15 minutes you spent trying to remove me from the bank, not once did you raise your voice. Not once did you become unprofessional. You stood by what you believed was right, even when it was difficult. The executives exchanged confused looks. This wasn't the reaction they'd expected. Ms. Thompson herself felt puzzled. Was he complimenting her? But, he continued, you're right about making a mistake. We all judge books by their covers sometimes. The question is, what do we learn from those moments? He looked around the room. How many of you would have treated me differently if I'd walked in wearing a suit? The uncomfortable shuffling of feet and averted gazes answered his question better than words could have. Outside, the crowd had grown larger. News vans were starting to park in front of the bank, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky. I have a different kind of meeting in mind now, Musk announced, standing up. The executives tensed, probably expecting the worst. Ms. Thompson, would you join me for a coffee? I think we need to have a real conversation about appearance, bias, and how we can turn this incident into something positive. The tension in the room shifted to confusion. The regional director's mouth actually fell open. Ms. Thompson felt like she must have misheard. You want to have coffee with me? Musk smiled, adjusting his MAGA hat. Sometimes the best lessons come from our biggest mistakes. Besides, he added with a slight grin, I think we've given social media enough excitement for one morning. Let's go somewhere quieter and talk about the future. As she stood up on shaky legs, Miss Thompson realized this might not be the end of her career after all. In fact, it might be the beginning of something entirely unexpected. The small coffee shop across from the bank offered a quiet escape from the chaos. Miss Thompson watched in amazement as Elon Musk casually ordered a plain black coffee, still wearing his controversial hat. The barista's hands shook so badly while making their drinks that she had to restart twice. Social media is really having a field day with this, Musk said, showing her his phone. The video of their confrontation had already reached millions of views. Comments were pouring in by the thousands, with people taking sides and sharing their own stories of prejudice and misjudgment. I've probably lost my job, haven't I? Miss Thompson asked quietly, staring into her untouched latte. The events of the morning felt surreal, like a strange dream she couldn't wake up from. Lost your job? Musk repeated, raising an eyebrow. Why would you think that? You did exactly what you were trained to do, maintain professional standards. The fact that you stuck to your principles, even when faced with an unusual situation, actually shows character. Outside the coffee shop's window, they could see reporters gathering near the bank entrance. Some were interviewing customers who'd witnessed the incident, while others were trying to get statements from bank employees. But the online comments, Miss Thompson's voice trailed off as she scrolled through her phone. Some people were calling for her firing, while others were defending her actions. The hashtag bank manager was now trending alongside hashtag Bankgate. The internet loves drama, Musk said, taking a sip of his coffee. But what matters is what we do with this moment. Tell me, what have you learned from this morning's events? She thought carefully before answering. I learned that my need to maintain perfect order made me forget about basic human decency. I was so focused on rules and appearances that I lost sight of what really matters in customer service. Musk nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of insight we need more of in the banking industry. Rules are important, but humanity matters more. Which brings me to my proposition. Just then, her phone buzzed with a news alert. A major financial website had already published an article about the incident. Bank manager confronts Elon Musk. A lesson in prejudice or professionalism. The press is going to want your side of the story, Musk continued. They'll try to paint you as either a villain or a hero. But I see an opportunity here. What if we could turn this incident into something meaningful? Miss Thompson looked up from her phone, confused. What do you mean? I'm putting together a task force, he explained, leaning forward. We're going to review and revamp customer service policies across all our branches. Not just dress codes and political expression policies, but the whole approach to how we treat people. And I want you to lead it. She nearly choked on her latte. Me? But I'm the one who caused this whole situation. Exactly, Musk smiled. Who better to lead a revolution in customer service than someone who's learned its importance the hard way? Your mistake this morning wasn't in enforcing policy. It was in forgetting that behind every policy should be a human element. Through the window, they could see more news vans arriving. The story was growing bigger by the minute. But somehow, sitting here with a man she tried to kick out of his own bank, Miss Thompson felt strangely calm. So, Musk said, pulling out his phone again. Should I tell the PR team you'll be joining me at the press conference this afternoon? We can announce the new initiative together. Turn this whole thing into something positive. Miss Thompson looked at her own phone, still buzzing with notifications, and made her decision. Sometimes the biggest mistakes led to the most unexpected opportunities. The bank's largest conference room had been hastily converted into a press area. Cameras flashed and reporters whispered among themselves as Miss Thompson stood behind the podium, her hands gripping its edges. Beside her, Elon Musk seemed perfectly comfortable in his casual attire, still wearing the same MAGA hat that had started it all. Good afternoon, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. Many of you have seen the viral video of what happened this morning. Rather than hide from it, I want to address it directly. The room fell silent, every phone and camera focused on her face. She glanced at her prepared statement, then set it aside. You know, I've spent 15 years in banking, always believing that professionalism meant following every rule to the letter. Today, I learned that true professionalism is about something much more important: treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance. A reporter raised his hand. But weren't you just doing your job? Following bank policy. Policy without perspective is just words on paper. Musk stepped in, adjusting his microphone. What impressed me wasn't that Ms. Thompson made a mistake. We all do that. What impressed me was her willingness to learn from it. The room buzzed with activity as journalists furiously took notes. Outside, through the large windows, crowds had gathered on the street, some holding supportive signs, others with critical messages. The whole scene felt like something from a movie. Which is why, Musk continued, I'm announcing a major change in how Pacific Trust Bank approaches customer service. He paused, letting the anticipation build. Starting today, we're launching the Beyond Appearances initiative, led by Ms. Thompson herself. The surprise announcement sent a wave of murmurs through the crowd. Cameras clicked rapidly as reporters rushed to update their stories. Miss Thompson felt her heart race. This was really happening. Our goal is simple, she added, finding confidence in the purpose of their mission. We want to create a banking environment where everyone feels welcome, where policies serve people rather than the other way around. A young reporter near the front raised her hand. Mr. Musk, why keep someone who tried to kick you out of your own bank? Musk actually laughed at this. Because sometimes the best teachers are those who've learned the hardest lessons. Besides, he gestured to his casual clothes and hat. I didn't exactly make it easy for anyone to recognize me. The press conference continued for another hour, with questions ranging from policy details to personal reflections. Throughout it all, Miss Thompson felt herself growing more comfortable, more certain that this unexpected turn of events might actually lead to something meaningful. As the event wound down, a senior reporter asked one final question. Ms. Thompson, what would you say to other professionals who might find themselves in similar situations? She thought for a moment, then smiled. I'd tell them that sometimes our biggest professional failures can become our greatest opportunities for growth. It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to learn and change. The bank's PR team was already reporting positive responses on social media. The hashtag Beyond Appearances was gaining traction, with people sharing their own stories of judgment and redemption. What had started as a potential disaster was transforming into something entirely different. After the last reporter left, Miss Thompson found herself alone with Musk in the conference room. "Ready for the real work to begin?" he asked, finally removing the famous hat and setting it on the table. Looking at the hat that had caused so much chaos, she realized that sometimes life's biggest lessons come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. 6 months had passed since that fateful Monday morning, and Pacific Trust Bank's main branch looked very different now. Gone were the rigid dress codes and stuffy atmosphere. Instead, a warm welcome sign greeted everyone who walked through the doors. "Come as you are, bank as you are." Miss Thompson stood in her office, now decorated with framed news articles about the infamous MAGA hat incident, alongside photos from training sessions she conducted across the country. The latest banking industry magazine sat on her desk, featuring her on the cover with the headline, "Banking's New Face: How One Mistake Changed an Industry." Her phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Peters, the regional director. "Just saw the latest customer satisfaction scores. We're up 40% from last year. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." She smiled, remembering how terrified she'd been of losing her job that day. The Beyond Appearances initiative had grown far beyond their initial expectations. What started as a simple policy review had evolved into a complete reimagining of customer service in banking. Other banks had started adopting similar programs, reaching out to Ms. Thompson for guidance and consultation. At her computer, she pulled up the latest training video they'd created. It featured real stories from bank employees and customers, sharing experiences about judgment and bias. The video had already been viewed millions of times online, sparking discussions about inclusion in financial services. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. One of the new tellers stood there, looking nervous. "Miss Thompson, there's someone in ripped jeans and a baseball cap asking about opening a business account. I wanted to check. I mean, I know our new policies, but you wanted to be sure," she finished, smiling knowingly. "Tell me, what does our welcome sign say?" The teller straightened up. "Come as you are, bank as you are," she recited, then nodded with understanding. "You're right. I'll help them right away." Later that afternoon, during their weekly video call, Musk appeared on her screen, wearing a different hat this time, one with the Beyond Appearances logo. "You've really outdone yourself," he said. "The program's success has exceeded all our projections." "It's amazing what can happen when you turn a mistake into a mission," she replied, glancing at the famous red hat now framed on her wall, a gift from Musk to remind her of where it all began. The call was interrupted by a notification. Another major bank had just announced they were adopting similar inclusive banking practices. The movement they'd started was spreading, changing the face of banking one branch at a time. As she walked through the lobby at closing time, Miss Thompson noticed something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Customers from all walks of life, some in suits, others in work clothes, even a few in clothes that would have once raised eyebrows, were being helped by her team. Each person was treated with the same respect and attention. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows through the bank's windows. She paused to straighten the welcome sign, remembering the day she'd nearly lost everything by judging a book by its cover. That mistake had led to the biggest success of her career, and more importantly, to a change that was helping others. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from Musk. Ready for phase 2. She smiled, knowing that their work was far from over. Sometimes the biggest mistakes really do lead to the greatest opportunities, and sometimes a simple hat can change not just a career, but an entire industry. As she locked up for the night, Miss Thompson realized that the true measure of success wasn't in avoiding mistakes. It was in how you learned from them. And by that measure, she'd never been more successful in her life.